Thank you for joining us today. We are so happy and so welcome to have you at our Energy Futures 2023, Developing a Roadmap to Energy Equity with Community Solar. Using the Energy Futures series, Groundswell is facilitating conversations about how we can build clean energy futures that serve communities with equity and respect. Today, we are energized to welcome a panel of experts on the development of community solar, serving low and moderate income or LMI households for a discussion about how to design roadmap models for specific communities while remaining scalable enough for the advancement and tracking of successful equity designed programs. If you have any questions or comments at any time, please type them into the chat box. We will answer as many questions as possible during the webinar. It is my pleasure to welcome our panel for today's webinar. First, we have Dr. Elvis Maleka, who is the Vice President of Labs and Data Science at Groundswell. Dr. Maleka leads research for accelerating low-income financing and transactions for solar access everywhere, or otherwise known as LIFT projects. Next, we have Ariel Drehabal, the Management and Program Analyst for DOE NCSB. Ariel leads work related to energy equity, energy affordability, and low-income energy efficient programs. She provides direct policy and research assistance to stakeholders working to advance equitable, clean energy policies and programs. And finally, Groundswell's Director of Energy Programs, Nicole Sondreger, is joining us today to share her insight into the development of equitable solar projects. Nicole has hands-on experience working with community partners to develop solar projects that serve community needs. We're going to kick things off with Dr. Maleka. Thank you for joining us today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tiffany, for that amazing introduction. And once again, good afternoon, everyone. So what we see on the screen is just a schematic diagram of an energy equity roadmap model. So to start with, the hallmark of energy equity is just to center the perspectives of frontline communities, including LMI, disadvantaged communities, as we use them interchangeably in this presentation. And what that means is that we first need to start by understanding what their needs and challenges are. So to list some of them, so that could mean lack of access, affordable access to clean energy. Some communities have a lot of energy burdens, including energy poverty, energy insecurity is part of it, including utility disconnection. For example, I think recently on the news, Virginia started tracking some of those. And in some communities, as what we've seen is that there's just a lot of energy inefficiency and some of the housing issues faced by these communities. But more importantly, we see a lot of disparity in terms of investment in whether those investments are channeled towards disadvantaged communities, including tribal communities. Now, as a solution, what distributional equity means is that how do we design policies that kind of address some of these root causes? And so the first thing is just to ensure that policy designs involve LMI communities in the process. So, and this is really important because we want to be able to ensure that uh, low and moderate income communities are included as part of their sustainability journey. But more importantly, when we design policies, we want to ensure that those policies are restorative. So by that, we need to ask ourselves is that how does this particular policy design framework or incentive kind of address some of the root causes? Uh, the other question to ask is, does the policy center the decision of marginalized communities? Often now and then you hear a lot of conversation that we need to be able to ensure that people who are part of decisions are being included in some of these design frameworks. That is, we need to be able to prioritize not only the needs of communities, but to ensure that they have a voice as well. And then it takes us now to how benefits are being allocated. One of the things about distributional equity is looking at the transmission mechanisms. This could imply frameworks and pathways through which benefits are being distributed in an equitable manner that serve disadvantaged communities. So the allocation is really important because there are a lot of decisions that comes with allocation of maybe federal benefits or federal funding. And lastly, from a distributional perspective, we want to be able to look at how does the policy design create access and promotes affordable clean energy. So could be in terms of community solar, as we'll be focusing mostly in this conversation today, or any other clean energy program. So while we have distributional equity that deals with policy design frameworks, there is also the implementation part of it, and that is where procedural equity comes into play. Now, this is really important because in terms of procedural equity, it kind of look at funding opportunities. We'll see why these two are connected. But more importantly, here we're addressing the implementational part of it. So now that policies have been designed, we know exactly the allocation of policy design framework, including resources. How do we implement some of these programs in an equitable way? What are the mechanisms through which some of these programs can be monitored as well to be able to ensure that to some extent we have achieved energy equity? And to share with us just a few examples, so it could be expansion of maybe X number of community solar projects, so these are now key indicators about metrics. So in procedural equity, the implementation is important, the design framework is important, but we're also kind of looking at very specific metrics that kind of really answer some of these questions. So, for example, a particular community want to increase number of LMI projects. For example, we also want to probably bring maybe energy efficiency, including housing repairs in maybe some communities. So we need to be able to ensure that there are statistics and numbers attributed to each of these frameworks. Or for other communities, it could be improving access maybe for eligible LMI household. And with community solar, we know there's just a lot of ways that we can do that. Be it carve out, for example, increasing the percentage allocation of system capacity that is being attributed to LMI household. It could also be improving or general accessibility. So let's say, for example, a particular community solar project historically, let's say, serve 20 LMI household, and we want to be able to improve that, let's say 30 or 25. So those are really some indicators that we might want to look at it based on a lot of factors. It could be as a result of improving eligibility, improving access, increasing solving some of the macro and social vulnerabilities issues that these communities face. And we've seen that as it pertains to our industry, it could also be expanding workforce development training for maybe a particular community. And some of those indicators could maybe increasing bill savings, which is something that is really important. At the moment, industry standard it stands at 20%. But one of the things that as we continue to embark on energy equity frameworks and procedures and policies, then we'll be able to see more of that benefits being passed on to LMI communities. So, and the benefit of this is that not only does it enhances, as I said, the social, the economic, and even environmental welfare of these communities, but it's also a means through which we can encourage ownership and adoption. Uh, and the last part there on procedural equity is about ensuring alignment with financial benefits. And that's why taking advantage or making use of federal opportunities are really important. But in procedural equity, we're tracking down. We're tracking down based on some of the needs that we've seen these communities face. Now, at the end of this webinar, we want to be able to ensure that participants can really be challenged, to start designing equity framework for each of the programs that they serve LMI communities. So the first thing is for procedural equity, it's not just the design framework that matters, but also it kind of offers a solution. So distributional equity is all about allocation, about policies. Procedural comes in terms of the implementation, but procedural equity does not end with implementation and tracking all of these matrices. It kind of offers solutions. So the first thing is that as a solution, it's important for every frontline community to be able to track, design some of these programs, so it's like a point like these are the programs that we have. How do we design an energy equity framework? And the very first thing to do is to be able to ensure that each of the programs are kind of tied or mapped to at least maybe three, I would say three to start with, some of the energy equity barriers that we've observed. It could be access, it could be reducing energy poverty or energy burden, it could be also increasing bill savings and things like that. Then after that, I think it's really important to look at a framework to create inclusive or innovative design programs now. So now that we've understood what the challenge is, how are we going to address this based on the specific programs that we use to serve LMI communities? And we've been able to map it to at least some of the barriers. Then I think what is really important is now those innovative solutions. And now it's important we tie them to some of these matrices. It's really important because by so doing, we'll be able to ascertain to the degree to which we've been able to accomplish energy equity. So tracking that over time is very important. Repeat the process over time. Because by repeating the process over time, it gives us an indication of the measure of energy equity based on the programs that we've been able to serve. And it goes further, depending on the long-term goal of the organization to be engaged in advocacy, partnership with other community-based organizations is really important, including legislation and peers. What this implies is that it kind of gives us the opportunity to be able to shape the energy future of these communities. And that ties into what I put there under advancing energy democracy. So fostering energy justice, ensuring that incentives are kind of targeted to communities that need it the most, promoting energy affordability, including climate justice, encouraging equitable distribution of benefits, which is really important from a procedural energy perspective as well. And also to foster inclusive energy access, whether that includes ownership as well as adoption. So with that being said, I will pass the mic back to Tiffany, and looking forward to answering some of your questions.
Thanks so much for that, Dr. Maleka. Great way to set up the foundation for this discussion. Now, let's bring Ariel into this conversation. I'm excited to hear how energy equity is being developed into the community solar framework. The floor is yours, Ariel.
Awesome. Thank you. So happy to be here today and happy to be speaking with folks about how the Department of Energy is thinking about developing community solar that fosters and promotes equitable outcomes. I have some slides, which I think should pop up shortly. As was said before, though, I work in the Solar Energy Technologies Office, the Department of Energy. and I focus on the National Community Solar Partnership, which is a program that's aiming to expand the development of community solar nationally that incorporates strong, equitable benefits. Awesome. Great. Feel free to jump forward. I thought I would start off, if we just go to the next slide, I think that would be great. So I want to cover a bit about the frameworks of how we're thinking about both defining community solar and its importance, as well as how the federal government generally is thinking about equitable processes and programs. And then I want to share with folks on the call how we at the National Community Solar Partnership are working to advance equity and community solar development through our programs and opportunities. And then happy to answer questions and join in the discussion. So what is community solar? This slide, we include the way that the Department of Energy defines community solar, which is a really broad definition. We define community solar as any solar project or purchasing program within a geographic area in which the benefits of that solar project are flowing to multiple customers. And then the next few bullets, I think there's two more that, if moving forward, are kind of focusing on why community solar is important for advancing equity. So right now, not all households across the country and or businesses are able to access the benefits of rooftop solar. About 50% of households and 50% of businesses are unable to host a solar system on their roof due to a number of factors. So community solar is a way to allow folks who can't host systems or who don't want to host systems to be able to access the benefits of solar generation. Typically, this isn't a bill credit on your bill. And what we're really focused on at the Department of Energy is ensuring that community solar includes these meaningful benefits. So we want to see community solar that is accessible for income eligible households. We want to see community solar leading to meaningful and deep savings on the electric bill, creating more resilient grid systems and microgrids, as well as working to build community wealth and ownership opportunities and bolstering the clean energy workforce. Moving to the next slide. So we are developing programs at the Department of Energy that are aiming to advance justice in the energy and environmental justice space. So the Biden administration right now is focused on ensuring that the investments that we are making through the federal government are addressing historic and equitable benefits, as well as creating greater diversity in scientific research and innovation. President Biden issued Executive Order 14008 during the first week in office, which established the Justice 40 Initiative. This is an initiative that's directing 40% of the overall benefits of certain federal investments, which includes clean energy, energy efficiency, clean transport, et cetera, directing those to flow to disadvantaged communities, which is a group of communities that are identified due to a number of systemic factors that the federal government has mapped. Moving to the next slide includes the Justice 40 policy priorities. So these are the 8 areas that, based on stakeholder engagement, the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, as well as through additional research and collaboration with the Office of Economic Impact and Diversity, these are the areas that were identified as areas that the Department of Energy would focus on in order to achieve the Justice 40 initiative. So these include decreasing energy burdens in these disadvantaged communities, decreasing environmental exposure and burdens, increasing the parity in clean energy technology across different sectors, access to low-cost capital for clean energy development, as well as focusing on energy democracy, workforce, and resiliency. Our next slide maps out the areas that we at the National Community Solar Partnership are focusing on in terms of equitable community solar development and how those map to the Justice 40 priorities. So the areas that we are in particular focusing on include these 5 here. So we're really looking at how community solar can lead to deep household savings, which aligns with that energy burden priority. We want to make sure that community solar is accessible to households at all income levels, and especially folks who have lower incomes, which aligns with priority 3, which is increasing parity in clean energy technologies. We want to see community solar help lead to a resilient grid, which ties into that priority around energy resiliency. We're also focused on opportunities to build wealth and ownership within communities through community solar development, which helps to increase energy democracy, as well as supporting a diverse and equitable workforce with prevailing wages, apprenticeship programs, and a diverse workforce sector, which ties in with that priority around clean energy jobs. So overall, our program is really tied into this overall high-arching view of what energy equity should look like across the Department of Energy, and especially through community solar clean energy development. Moving to the next slide. Awesome. So now I'm going to provide just a brief overview of what we're doing at the Department of Energy to advance equitable community solar development, as well as a high-level overview of some of our key programs. And if anybody has any questions about these or wants to speak further, please feel free to reach out to me after the webinar. Happy to speak more about the work that we're doing. So moving to the next slide. This is a high-level overview of the main work areas that we are focused on through the National Community Solar Partnership to really advance these meaningful benefits and move us towards our target of having 5 million households have access to the benefits of community solar by 2025 while achieving $1 billion in energy savings. The next slide shows a high level of the main initiatives that we're focused on under each of these areas. And I'll be speaking a bit more about most of these now. But at a high level, we are focused on providing direct technical assistance to folks to help advance community solar development and policy. We're supporting states through peer engagement, through our states collaborative. We also have initiatives to help folks access gap funding and capital to develop community solar, as well as to help remove some of those barriers that folks face when connecting with projects, as well as opportunities to help showcase how folks are incorporating equity into community solar programs that are being developed. So I'm going to talk a bit more about some of these on the next few slides. Moving to the next one, we're going to start off with our technical assistance and capacity building area. So I think this is really exciting that through the National Community Solar Partnership, we have the opportunity to offer no-cost technical assistance to any member of the National Community Solar Partnership. To become a member, you just have to be doing work in the United States and interested in community solar. I'll post a link in the chat on how to sign up for the National Community Solar Partnership. But if you're interested in learning more and accessing our technical assistance, just requires signing up on a form online and you can get access to this. Through our technical assistance, we can provide support across all of these different areas: policy, financing support, support on outreach and engagement strategies across different groups, as well as program design and other technical issues. We work with the national labs, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory and Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, as well as other key partners to help provide this assistance to folks. If folks have any questions, let me know. I'd be happy to help connect you with these resources. Moving on to the next slide. Wanted to provide a little bit of overview on the research and work that we've also been doing around looking at how community solar has been advancing and developing across the United States. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory has published a few reports looking at the state of the community solar market called Sharing the Sun, as well as last year published a report on state energy efficiency or the state community solar policies and programs. This map here is showing which states currently have legislation in place that allows for community solar to be easily developed, as well as which ones have specifically low-income programs in place. Overall, this is 22 states in the District of Columbia that have this legislation in place, but even without that legislation, there are 44 states currently that have at least one community solar project developed. So this legislation definitely makes it a bit easier, but isn't entirely necessary in all cases to develop community solar. In particular, without this legislation, municipal utilities or municipal governments and cooperative utilities can develop community solar projects even without this legislation in place. And we expect that with a lot of the different federal incentives that are coming forward through the Inflation Reduction Act, Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, that community solar will continue expanding in the years to come. The next slide has a brief overview of some of the different ways that community solar policy differs amongst different states. As I was saying, some states have this enabling legislation and some do not. In states that don't have enabling legislation, community solar typically doesn't lead to bill savings or doesn't necessarily lead to bill savings. All states that have a low income specific program in place do guarantee bill savings currently for the households that participate in that. But I think it's important to highlight that community solar markets look really different in different states depending on the legislation that's put forward, as well as the types of programs that are being developed. Secondly, the consumer protections can also vary and be a bit different across different states currently for community solar. Some states have different requirements in terms of how community solar can be marketed or developed. And I'll just flag that DOE is currently working with the National Consumer Law Center to write and create a best practice report that'll highlight best practices for states in particular in developing community consumer protections for community solar. So stay tuned for that we're hoping to publish that before the end of this calendar year. And lastly, in terms of billing, some states have consolidated billing, some have two different types of billing in terms of having to pay the subscription fee separately, which can be a big challenge for some folks, especially folks who are lower income, to manage two bills. And this is something that we're seeing change amongst more states over time. Moving to the next slide. Also wanted to highlight the Community Power Accelerator program that we are operating out of the National Community Solar Partnership. This is a project that aims to connect developers, investors, philanthropists, community-based organizations all together in order to create an ecosystem of partners who can work together to create more equitably focused community solar projects and help them be financed and deployed. The Accelerator is really helping to create a pipeline of credit-ready community solar projects that provide these benefits to communities, while connecting projects with mission-aligned investors and philanthropic organizations to help get projects off the ground and funded. The next slide provides a brief overview of what's included in the Community Power Accelerator. So we currently have an online platform where folks can sign up and make an account if you're someone who is developing community solar or who wants to help finance community solar. We also created resources, including a credit-ready checklist to help especially small and nonprofit developers identify all of the key pieces that need to be in place before approaching financiers to get a project financed. We also have a learning lab, which walks newer developers through step-by-step how to develop a community solar project with the goal of bringing more mission-driven and community-based organizations into the development field. We also put together a philanthropy ready guide to help folks best be prepared to approach philanthropy to help fund projects. And we also have technical assistance available to support folks through this program and prize funding. The next two slides speak a little bit more about our prize, which is currently open that folks can apply to. So we currently have round 2 of our Community Power Accelerator prize open. And the goal of this is a $10 million prize that is designed to fast track efforts of new, emerging, and expanding solar developers and co-developers who want to learn, participate, and grow their operations to support multiple successful community solar projects, while creating a robust ecosystem that incorporates the meaningful benefits in equitable community solar development. The next slide provides a little bit more overview on what the prize looks like. So right now, phase 1 of the prize is open. This phase will last for about 3 months. And each organization that is awarded the prize, up to 25 can win, and you would receive $50,000 for that first round. Organizations that win that phase 1 are able to apply for phase 2, and likewise, folks who win phase 2 can apply for phase 3. And it's really focused on helping build up capacity for smaller developers to be able to develop community solar with those equitable benefits in place. The application opened on July 14th and is closing on October 4th. So if you're interested, please check it out. I think the link we can post in the chat. I think it can also come up as a banner on the bottom of the screen at some point in time. Happy to answer questions. Moving to the next slide, I think I want to highlight a little bit. One other project that I'm currently working on is called the Low-Income Clean Energy Connector. So this is an effort that we're doing in partnership with the Department of Health and Human Services to help connect income-qualified households through the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program with community solar projects that have strong consumer protections and meaningful bill savings included. So the goal of this project is to help address some of those barriers that households face in terms of accessing community solar and qualifying for community solar based on income. We're working with a number of partners as we build this project out. Moving to the next slide. At a high level, we're currently working with 6 states as we're building out this software that's going to help make these secure connections between households and subscriptions that are available. We're initially going to be rolling the project out in Illinois, New Mexico, and the District of Columbia, but we're also working closely with New York, New Jersey, and Colorado. And ultimately, we want this to be a software that any state can opt into using, as long as they have a low-income community solar program in place and those strong consumer protections. Moving to the next slide. This is just a high-level walkthrough of how this software will work in particular. Happy to answer more questions about it as needed. But basically, the state is going to be verifying and approving subscription managers that'll be using this software, as well as local LIHEAP administrators. The local LIHEAP administrators would then, as they're enrolling someone in the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, would be able to provide some education and information about community solar and identify who is interested in enrolling in community solar. That information would be securely uploaded into the connector software. And then folks who are interested in a subscription and where there is one available will be connected with a subscription manager that has a subscription. Subscription managers would then provide compensation to the local LIHEAP administrators for their work of enrolling households. And then the state will be verifying that the subscription managers are meeting consumer protections and achieving the bill savings that we're aiming to see. Moving to the next slide, just a high level of why you would want to use the connector if you were a state. So we're really aiming to streamline benefit enrollment, make it really easy for folks to access community solar benefits and deep savings. It helps to provide compensation to those local agencies who are enrolling folks and providing them with this information, and helping to ensure that there's strong consumer protections in place. Moving to the next slide. This is just a high-level overview of a few other that are working to advance equity that touch on community solar. So I'm not going to go into these in detail, but I'll flag the first one here. We did a webinar series over the summer on the meaningful benefits in community solar, and we have 5 recorded webinars that you can check out if you're interested in learning more about each of those different areas of equitable community solar development and project examples within those. And then, again, not going to go through those in detail, but please feel free to check them out if interested. And lastly, in terms of some next steps of engaging more with the Department of Energy, would love for folks to join the National Community Solar Partnership. The link is on this slide here. You will receive a weekly newsletter, as well as additional information from us. Feel free to also check out our resource list. once you're a member, we have a resource list that the National Renewable Energy Laboratory has been compiling of community solar resources. And stay tuned for more updates from us. So with that, I'll pass it back to the Groundswell team, and looking forward to answering questions and engaging in discussion. Thank you.
There was a wealth of valuable and beneficial information you provided in your presentation, especially around the Community Accelerator project. Good stuff. Thank you, Ariel. Thank you. Very informative. Now, I do see we have questions in the chat. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, please make sure you put them in the chat box, and we will get to those questions shortly. But before we do, let's hear from our final panelist for today's webinar. She brings a wealth of expertise and insight. Her name is Nicole. Nicole, I'm so excited to get more information on the metrics of equity, and community solar. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, and great to hear from Dr. Elvis at the start and from Ariel and all the ways that DOE is approaching equity and community solar. So I'd like to go back a little bit in thinking about Dr. Elvis Maleka's equity roadmap, and he talked about procedural equity. And so I wanted to touch on that piece of the equity roadmap and offer some potential sample equity metrics that can be tracked in community solar projects. Next slide. As a mission-driven organization, Groundswell's community solar projects have been working to deliver the meaningful benefits that Ariel and DOE have so nicely described and categorized. And we have been tracking metrics which align with these categories, but there are still opportunities for improvement always. You know, community solar as a whole is still somewhat new, and so we're still learning and growing as we go. And so I'd like to touch on some examples of projects for which Groundswell has tracked metrics and what these look like and how tracking them drives improvements. I'd also like to share some ideas for metrics that we would like to start incorporating as well. And so Groundswell looks at equity metrics in two stages of community solar projects. The first in the project development stage, you know, how we project. And the second in the subscriber management phase, you know, how we actually run the project and serve our intended customers. And now this isn't how it has to be done. This is just one approach of looking at it in these two phases. Next slide, please. And so I want to start with some example equity metrics in the project development phase. And you'll notice that these align with the categories that Ariel described. I thought that might make it easier for us to see how it all fits together. So the first one is geography, and this is talking about serving disadvantaged communities. You know, before Justice 40, this is already the kind of work that Groundswell was doing, but the Justice 40 framework really makes it clear where those disadvantaged communities are and how we can serve them. And so we can think about geography in terms of where a project is actually physically located or where the target beneficiaries live, and can be really important because it can impact workforce opportunities that are linked to a project. By signing the project in a disadvantaged community, it's more likely that the job opportunities can be provided to a local resident. And so a disadvantaged community can be, you know, persistent poverty area, high poverty neighborhoods. We can use the CEJST equity tool. That's a really nice map that's publicly available that will make it very easy to see where some of these areas are. Citing a project in a disadvantaged community isn't always the best approach or is even possible. So focusing on where the target beneficiaries live is a different approach you can use as well. And with community solar, we typically need those beneficiaries to be in the same utility territory as the project. And so in that perspective, not too far away from the physical location. Another metric to look at here is the dollar value delivered to the host site, and thinking about that dollar value, for example, as a lease payment flowing back into the community in terms of services. The next category is LMI household access, and this capacity specifically for LMI customers, and this can be measured. Oh, I think we jumped ahead a slide. Alicia, if we could go back. Yeah, I'll still be on here for a little bit. So LMI household access can be in terms of the percent of capacity that is reserved for LMI customers or the number of customers that a project can serve. We can also look at greater household savings. So that means delivering meaningful savings from the subscriptions. And this is the most direct benefit that community solar can offer, is actual dollars in your pocket. And so meaningful, I think, as Dr. Maleka described earlier, is usually defined as 20% savings. So that can be a threshold to aim for. And the level of savings that a project can deliver is often highly dependent on policy and available incentives. Now that we have much greater federal incentives available, more and more projects should be able to hit this target, but there's also a lot of state policy that enables this. Or if a project has significant grant funding as part of the capital stack, that can also significantly impact the savings that can be offered. Next is workforce, and that can mean various things. It can mean hiring businesses owned by members of disadvantaged groups, hiring workforce trainees, or paying fair wages and offering good career paths. So some measures can be the number of minority or women-owned businesses hired, or possibly even better, the dollar value of their contracts or the percent versus the total cost of the project. You could also measure the number of hours or the total wages of workforce trainees. You could also ensure that prevailing wages are paid. And this is actually going to become a requirement for large projects, even for the base investment tax credit. Lastly is community ownership. And that means that low-income communities derive the value associated with asset ownership. This is something that's harder to measure. You could say, yes, no, is it community owned or not? But what does community mean is also a question. Is it a group of people in the community? Can a nonprofit, a social service organization, for example, be representative of community as the owner? So that's a little bit, I think, newer and something to explore some more. One potential metric I thought of is you could look at a comparison of additional savings that are derived from having that direct community ownership versus a third-party ownership. But I think this criteria might still be a little bit more qualitative in nature. There's also a possibility of looking at greater decision-making influence or participation in clean energy by a community owning their assets. And finally, Ariel mentioned resilience and grid benefits as a category. From Groundswell's perspective, we haven't developed a specific community solar project with these objectives in mind, but we have delivered behind-the-meter solar projects which deliver energy resilience in the form of backup power to organizations serving vulnerable households. And so I didn't include metrics because we didn't have one specific to community solar. Next slide, please. So obviously how we design and build a project has a huge impact on what happens next. And it's where we need to place most of our attention. However, there's also a lot of opportunity to focus on what happens once a project is energized and we have subscribers. This offers an opportunity to see if we're actually serving the people that we meant to serve in the ways that we meant to serve them. So a few potential metrics we could look at are the percent of LMI subscriptions that we actually filled. So did we not only plan to have a lot of LMI subscribers, but are we successfully enabling participation with our model? We should also verify savings. So are we delivering the savings that we promised? And we could look at system production here. That's a huge one, right? If your solar system isn't producing the amount of energy you thought it would, that's going to impact the value that people are obtaining. It's also very important a metric could be to verify the accuracy of credits on utility bills. As many of you in the industry know, there's been some challenges with utilities and inaccuracy in the value of credits. So that's an important place to keep a fine eye on. We could also look at churn rates. Are customers stay in the program? Are they deriving that value that we wanted them to derive only for a year or for multiple years? And what does that mean about our program? And how can we better adjust it? We could also look at different types of customer service ratings. How well are we serving our customers? Oftentimes, and I'm thinking mostly of like government programs serving low-income customers, there's not as much attention on the customer experience. And I think if we're really trying to build equitable projects, we should always think about making sure we're serving our customers in the best way possible. And this can be a metric that you can track. Finally, there's also workforce development opportunities in subscriber acquisition, management, and system O&M, and the list goes on. So you could use some of those same types of metrics that I mentioned for project development over on this end of the project. Next slide. So I would like to move on to sharing a few sample projects that Groundswell has built and the equity metrics that we've tracked there. Next slide. So the first project is Paddington Square Apartments. That's a 273 kilowatt community solar project serving 91 households in Maryland. And 30% of the capacity of the project is reserved for low-income households and the rest for our market rate subscribers. So some of the equity metrics that we've tracked, the first is LMI household access. So Maryland's community solar project requires that at least 10% of the capacity is reserved for LMI, and this project allocates 30%. So there's the metric from the policy perspective, and then there's what we were actually able to hit, which is higher. In terms of savings, LMI participants receive free subscriptions, which actually ensures that they retain the most possible value from their subscriptions, and that's equivalent to about 50% energy cost savings. Finally, we also look at the percent of LMI subscriptions that have been filled. At this point in time, 100%, might be 95, there might be one spot that's not filled right now, but almost all of the subscriptions for low-income customers have been filled. We also have to look from an operational perspective as to whether our market rate subscriber spots have been filled, because those financially support the low income ones. That's more operational than an equity metric, but just something to consider. Next slide, please. The next project is Sargent Memorial Presbyterian Church in DC. This is a 256 kilowatt community solar project serving 73 subscribers in total. This project received an incentive from the DC Solar for All program, which enabled 100% of the subscriptions to be offered at no cost to low-income households. Some of the equity metrics in this project, looking at geography. So this church is in Ward 7 in DC, which is one of the most under-resourced neighborhoods in the city. And so the church, which is the host site, also receives an annual lease payment. And so that value which the church gathers can be funneled back into services for the local community, thereby bringing more value there. We also looked at workforce. We worked with a minority-owned EPC, Suncatch Energy. Now, we have not tracked the dollar value of contracts or the percent of the total cost of the project, and it's something that I think would be great to start doing. We also looked at LMI allocation. And so the DC Solar for All program requires that 100% of the capacity is dedicated to low-income households, and our project meets that criteria. And then finally, bill savings, similar to our previous project that I mentioned. Participants receive free subscriptions, which are equal to about 50% savings. Next slide. So the Sargent Memorial Presbyterian Church project is part of DC Solar for All's program, which also includes subscriber management services. And Groundswell has served in this role of providing subscriber management services for a few years. And so now, I've been talking a lot about equity metrics in the project development phase and wanted to switch in the same project into some of the metrics on the subscriber management side. And so at the program level, some of the metrics that have been tracked are the percent of LMI subscriptions that have been filled. So DC Solar for All has a goal of serving 100,000 households by 2032. To date, they've only reached about 6,000. And so it's a very important metric to track because it shows, okay, this is where we wanted to be. This is where we are. What do we need to do? And Ariel actually mentioned some of this in her presentation. DC is looking, how can we work with LIHEAP and other federal assistance programs and streamline the process for customer acquisition so that more people can get this benefit. In terms of verifying savings, Groundswell closely monitors production and allocation of those credits and to flag any issues and make adjustments as needed. And we do that across all of our community solar projects. For DC Solar for All, we actually produced an annual report and found higher savings than projected. So that was good and valuable information for the program to consider going forward. Finally, in terms of customer service, as you'll remember, I said it's important to know how you're serving your customers. We track our Net Promoter Score, which gives us a lot of information across different dimensions of customer service satisfaction, constantly helping us learn how we're doing and how we can improve. Next slide. The final project that I wanted to talk about is Christ for Everyone in Illinois. This is a 654 kilowatt low-income community solar project. It's part of the Illinois Solar for All program, which from a policy perspective and design has very strict regulations to ensure projects meet equitable goals. So it can be easier to know which metrics to track, sometimes harder to make your projects be able to fit all these criteria, but it offers a very clear guideline of what the state wants to see. And so in terms of geography, this project is located in Chicago Heights, which has a high concentration of vacant land and is very underdeveloped. So by bringing a project there, we're bringing investment into the community. And our desire was to target the benefits to income qualified members of the church, thereby keeping the benefits in the community. terms of workforce, again, we worked with a minority EPC called Supreme Solutions. They were a little newer to solar as well. So this isn't more on the qualitative side, but we helped kind of help them get a foothold and more of a reputation in this industry. We also, Illinois Solar for All has workforce development programs that they certify. And so our project used some trainees from that program, and about 16% of the installation hours were performed by those trainees. Something that we learned through this process is we were thinking a lot about construction and installation, but we could have looked at workforce participation in all the project development planning, the sales side, O&M side. So that's an opportunity to broaden how you think about workforce beyond just direct construction or installation. And then finally, for bill savings, the Illinois Solar for All project requires that at least 50% of the subscription value be derived by participants in savings. And so our project is designed to meet that and was only recently energized. And so we'll be tracking it as it is actually serving subscribers. And so that is all for me. I hope that this gives you at least some examples of some equity metrics that you can think of and how you can tie together sort of these policy program objectives with your end project and what you might want to look at. And that's all. I'll pass it back over to Tiffany.
Thanks so much. Great stuff, Nicole. Thanks. Now we'll bring everyone back on this call and let's transition into the Q&A portion of today's webinar. As I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions or comments at any time, please go ahead and type them in the chat box. Now let's get started answering some questions. The first question that I see is, how is community solar similar to and different from a microgrid? And anybody can take this question.
I can start, but actually, Ariel, when I saw that question, I thought of you because of something in how DOE defines community solar. Because if I'm thinking just from sort of the technical perspective, community solar is sort of a single array that's connected to the grid. It's an in front of the meter connection. People know what that means, but basically exporting energy to the grid, and you have a pool of subscribers that derive the monetary benefits of that energy. Versus a microgrid is more of a behind the meter with solar and storage, and its purpose is to provide energy for backup power. But I was curious, Ariel, not to put you on the spot, but if you can tell us in DOE's definition of community solar, does a microgrid fall into the same definition, or do you see those as separate things?
Yeah, I think as you were saying, Nicole, I think the definitions are separate, but there can be some overlap. I think for community solar, depending on where it is sited on the grid, and especially if you have backup battery storage provided, you could use community solar as a microgrid, and there are some cases of that. But typically, they are kind of two separate things that can be interrelated.
Thanks, Ariel. Thanks, Nicole, on that definition of that for us. Next question. So in our presentation, well, in everyone's presentation today, you guys talked about how to develop equitable community solar. How do you know if your project is meeting that goal? And just to bring it back to Dr. Maleka's roadmap at the beginning, how do you know that you've arrived at that destination?
I'll go ahead and probably answer this. The very first thing is to be able to track it. And I think the main reason for having this webinar is because having done research in this area, we felt like as an industry, we are not really tracking some of these indicators. So I think it's to be able to, first of all, understand what the barriers are, as I stated, and what are those key indicators or metrics. And it helps in the program design to be able to track. So for example, as Nicole and Ariel shared, to be able to link some of these metrics to program design framework. So once we develop a framework of tracking these, the only way we know is to be able to track it and provide statistics. Let's say, for example, the example that each of our presenters gave is assuming that we wanted to maybe increase workforce development by maybe a certain proportion, or maybe for a certain community. So we can be able to say one of the energy inequity issues that we experienced was maybe workforce development, for example. And by providing maybe training in this community, we've been able to achieve X amounts. And so, for example, that imply maybe we worked with 3 or 4 community-based organizations that also provided training to maybe X amount of people. So this is how we track this, and over time we'll be able to come up with a particular threshold. Nicole and Ari, do you want to maybe add to that?
Yeah, I'll add that something that we're thinking about doing this fall at DOE is exploring more fully what each of those meaningful benefit categories can look like, and what a goal could be around each of them in terms of access, savings, resilience, workforce, and ownership and community benefits. So stay tuned for more information on that from our end. I think that the definition of what's enough in each of those areas is a conversation that we want to be having with stakeholders to understand what the best practices are. Right now, we're aiming to see at least 20% bill savings for community solar to bring community solar benefits on par with the average rooftop solar. But I would say for low income, deeper savings is possible, and we've seen it through the Solar for All programs in DC and Illinois. And to align with the Justice 40 initiative, would like to see at least 40% low-income access to community solar as well.
Perfect. All right. We have questions rolling in. Thank you, Ariel, for that. We have a question from Ephraim. He says, rookie with a location, starting a community solar project. Is there a framework of goals to achieve or a good contact to walk us through beyond the technical designs?
Sure, I'll flag if you're looking for support on developing a community solar project. If you join the National Community Solar Partnership, again, we have our no-cost technical assistance program where you can submit like a specific question, and our experts are happy to help with that. We also, through our learning lab, are having a workbook developed that will help walk developers through the process of developing a community solar project, especially with these equitable pieces in mind. That workbook isn't published yet, but should be published very soon. So keep an eye out for that. Yeah, happy to answer any other more specific questions, but I think reaching out to our technical assistance program could be very helpful.
And I would just add, National Community Solar Partnership is a great resource. A few years ago when I was starting doing some research on community solar, that's how I got connected to a lot of information. But I was also going to add that I think Elvis shared this at the beginning. Part of it is understanding where you're working and what the main energy equity challenges there are. I think what DOE shared and I shared are a lot of general things you can look at, right? Like the bill savings, the workforce, the location. And sometimes that can be a little overwhelming. Do I need to hit every single one of those in my project? And the answer is no, right? And it might be about trying to tackle the greatest issue in the area that you're in and trying to pursue how can I design my project to target that specific thing. So just some food for thought on it.
Thanks, Nicole. Jess is back with a question asking, I'm not very good with financial models, but am I understanding correctly that a grid-tied community solar project has subscribers that pay a set fee and no additional cost per kilowatt hours? Is that how it generates savings, or no fee in some LMI cases?
I can take my first stab at that one. So I would say it's going to depend a lot. It's not always standard how it works, right? In different projects, different states might do it a little bit differently. But essentially, in most states, the community solar does exist, especially with policy. That energy is sort of cheaper than that same amount of energy if you would just buy it directly from the grid. And so savings for LMI can come from different ways. In Groundswell's, a lot of our programs, what we've tried to do is use cross-subsidy models, for example, where our market rate customers are paying a subscription fee and LMI customers are not. So that whole value of energy is given to them for free. Sometimes we have specific discount rates that are applied only for low-income subscribers. It just sort of depends how it's structured, but ultimately they're seeing a reduction in their bill credits, sometimes paying for a subscription just at a lower rate and sometimes not paying for a subscription at all. I don't know if Elvis or Ariel, if there's anything you want to add there.
Yeah, thanks so much, Nico. Yeah, I'll go ahead and say it depends on the developer as well as what the regulations are for that particular state. And I think it's really important because I think microgrids and community solar projects have kind of, I think we really need to understand the mechanisms through which this will work, especially when it comes to taking advantage of incentives. You know, both of them are really great. You know, they offer almost the same benefit, but there's some similarities and differences, and I think we need more on that. So understanding the thought processes, you know, not only the financial model, understand the technical model behind these two projects are really important because there are arguments right now from a resiliency perspective, right? So like, hey, it would be easier if we had a community solar project and then embed a microgrid into that, you know. So there are a lot of issues to consider, but I think it will depend on the developer, to your question, Jess, as well as the regulatory structure in that particular state.
Thank you, Dr. Malika, Nicole, Ariel, for that answer. Ephraim has come back. Ariel, he's volunteering. If you need someone to proofread, he'll go ahead and he'll be happy to do so. So it looks like you have one volunteer there. And then it looks like, Ephraim, you want to know about Groundswell. What do we do? In a nutshell, we build community power. I would definitely urge you to look on our website, groundswell.org, find out all the amazing things that we're involved in the community in Maryland, in DC, and Georgia. We're in Illinois, so definitely check us out. I'm pretty sure that they will go ahead and drop that link on the chat so that you can click on, and we invite everyone to check out Groundswell to find out more of the amazing things that we do. With that being said, I want to thank all of our panelists today, Nicole, Ariel, and Elvis for speaking today. And thank you to the audience members for spending time with us today. If you would like to watch this fantastic webinar again, or share it with someone who you may feel may be interested in the information that was shared here today, please check it out on our YouTube page. A link will be shared with all registered attendees by email after the webinar. We also hope that you join us again in the future for our next Energy Futures webinar. Stay tuned for that date and that topic. Thank you for joining us today and have an amazing day.